All right, I want to welcome everyone here to the last of this fall 2020 here rental licensing webinar series. This is being brought to you by the Planning and Code Administration Department with our neighborhood service team providing that within that department there. We're going to give you basically a technical review of one of the aspects of the property maintenance code. And some of these times it's a common question that we receive. Now, I want everyone to know this is not a full comprehensive review of this section. That we're just basically kind of giving you the generalities of it so you get a better understanding of what would be required. And we always want you to consult with our office whenever you're considering anything or happen to be watching these webinars. Just always reach out to our office to get the full answer for anything. This is just to give you a general overview. We want you to have better thoughts and understanding of what would be required. To ask any questions while it's going along so you don't forget it, certainly just click or tap on that Q&A button. It's probably located at the bottom of your screen, and you can just type it in there, and as time allows, we'll get to them at the very end. And today we're going to walk you through the technical aspects of a 1 and 2 family home. How do I convert that attic into habitable space? I want to make it another bedroom. So how can I go about that? I'm actually going to be your expert for today, where I can walk you through these types of things. It's something very common that I'll go out and help property owners with. And so I'm just going to lead you through this process. And for your knowledge, I'm certified as a property maintenance inspector through the International Code Council, along with some other things. So now we'll go ahead and get into this here. Let's see if I can share this screen for us to look at. Oops, I'm sorry, we're at the very bottom. All right, so like I said, we're going to be covering 1 and 2 family attic spaces, what makes them habitable. All right, so we got to get some baseline information before we start about what are the requirements are. What is habitable space? That is one of the first things we kind of have to address. And, this space is used for living, sleeping, eating, or cooking. That is what habitable space means. So basically, we kind of understand that if someone's looking to convert this into habitable space, you're looking for one of those purposes. I would have to be honest, it probably isn't going to be a dining room and probably not going to be a kitchen if you're looking at converting the attic into habitable space. Most likely you're looking for it to be a bedroom, and on rare occasions we might see like a rec room or like a family room type of situation that you want to have on that attic space. So we understand we're going to take the approach as mostly you want to make it into another bedroom because you maybe have a 2-bedroom duplex that you're looking to make into a 3-bedroom, or a 3-bedroom into a 4-bedroom type of duplex. So that's what we're going to focus this webinar on, is how to make this into a bedroom. The one thing we want to make sure everyone's aware of, that there are going to be several codes to take uninhabitable space and make it habitable. So there are several different codes that come into play with this. Just always remember, each case is unique. I'm giving you basically a general information of a basic standard type of situation. Your situation may be unique, and there may be another requirement that you have to meet, or there may be a requirement that you don't have to meet just based on your situation. So there's always contact with our office. A quick note for everyone is that with our permit history is that, this has always been required to have permits to convert these attics into habitable space. Hagerstown's an old town. Many of the places did not have these attics as habitable space years ago. Some did, and then they just didn't utilize them, and then they deteriorated, but majority of them did not have attics as habitable spaces. So a permit's always been required for this. Our records will indicate that if we go out to do an inspection and see a bedroom in this location, but it's not meeting certain code thresholds, we're going to potentially know that this was done without the proper permits in place. So whenever you're doing this type of work, you want to make sure that you get the proper permits. And hire licensed contractors. If you don't have the permits in place and have the proper inspections associated with those, and hired unlicensed contractors to perform the work, it could be additional costs for you in the long run. Now, a lot of times people think, well, I'm saving money because I'm not spending those types of things, but you may have additional costs associated with stuff without getting the proper permits and licensed contractors from the very beginning. So as a word of caution, just make sure that you're doing that. Again, our goal was just basically trying to let you know the amount of work that may be involved with this type of project. All right, so one of the first things that we have to consider is before you think, well, I'll just go ahead and apply for a permit, we got to take a couple things into consideration on this first. How do I access the attic? Obviously, the pull down stair type of situation, hatchway, is not going to be a reasonable way to think that that's a way to access the attic. So you're going to want to be able to typically thinking about this for easier rule of thumb, you want that attic stairs to already exist for an access space. Now, in the diagram I have on the screen here, you'll see the kitchen, dining, and living room on the first floor. And on the second floor, we have a bedroom 1, bedroom 2, and bedroom 3. Typically in Hagerstown, we'll see these types of ones where bedroom 2 is what we would call a walk-through bedroom, meaning that there's no walls. They're kind of separating anyone to access any of the other bedrooms, but it's been like that forever since the building was existing. So we don't say that it can't be a bedroom. We're just saying that it's a walk-through bedroom. It's an existing type of space. Well, if you want to make that attic an habitable space, now this isn't original design anymore. This is going to be something where it is considered an alteration, and that is not original design. So you can't keep the existing walk-through bedroom. That you may lose that bedroom, which we come across frequently, where people have done the work without permits to convert that attic space, and then they basically eliminated their walk-through bedroom. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that you have to come up with other options. So when I advance the slide here, you can kind of see that you could add a wall in that area, and then now you've created a hallway along that space. People can still get to bedroom 1 and 3, but now there is a wall there where you would access bedroom 2. Bedroom 2 may be a little bit smaller, but if you're looking at, I'm making now this a 4-bedroom apartment, I know that my potential rental income, or if I'm doing this as a single family home for myself, that I have that other space for someone to safely reside. So a wall in this area would be required by our department in order to have that attic bedroom space. So that's a cost that's not even in the attic area that you may have associated with it. The one thing that you want to remember, if you are adding that wall, you have to maintain that the room is at least 7 foot wide, and it's got to be 70 square feet. My example that I just realized is only 64 square feet. So you need to make sure that you're keeping 70 square feet of space for that to be considered a bedroom. So I apologize for the bad example. Didn't catch that till just now. But that you do need to make sure that you have at least 7 foot width and 10 foot in depth to at least be considered a bedroom still at that location for bedroom 2. Also, we got to think about the stairs and the landing. So in the other graphic here, you'll see where you have a set of stairs. You got to have the proper clearance for those areas. And that is 6 foot 8 inches when you're traveling a flight of stairs. You need to make sure that you have that proper clearance. I've been in them before where people are like, yeah, the other bedroom's up on the attic, or just to access the attic that I have to duck down and my back's touching the walls. I'm kind of weaving my way around this set of stairs there. That's not going to be a set of stairs that's going to meet code for it to be a habitable space. You're going to make sure that you have the proper clearances on those stairs and at the landings. So that's something that you want to take in consideration. Now, based on my example I gave you, that's a typical duplex that we have here in Hagerstown. And a lot of times they already meet that requirement. So yours might already meet it as well if you're looking at this for potential permit in the future. The one thing too is that the stairs, you need to make sure they have the proper tread depth and riser height. So in a residential home, 1 and 2 family, that it needs to be 7 3/4 inch riser heights and 10-inch deep treads. So that's something that you're going to want to have to remember when you're doing this. Now we can take in consideration the existing stairs. That's the way they may be, but that is the standard that we're going to be looking at. Like I said, every situation is case by case. I'm just giving you what the code requirements are, and an inspector and the plan reviewer will actually take a look at what your situation is, whether or not they will approve that conditions that you have. Also, handrails and guardrails. You're going to be required to have a handrail going up the stairs. That's required if the attic is habitable or uninhabitable. Still need a handrail going up and down those stairs. But the requirement being with the guardrails at the top, you need to make sure that the guardrails are in place, where sometimes the stairs just come up and the handrail's there, but it just opens up into the attic space. And the reason being is that you don't want to put any guards in place sometimes for the ability for people to store things up in that area. Well, no matter if it's habitable or uninhabitable, guards are still required. It's just that if you are putting guards in place to access that area in uninhabitable spaces, that's not sometimes an issue because you can still get up the stairs. But if you are putting guards in place because it's habitable, now you'll still need to maintain your clearance and access to the space. So at times you might have it where the slope comes across and the guard comes out that you have to duck around. In an habitable situation, that's not going to be permitted. So you need to consider that as well as where the attic accesses or where the stairs access that attic area. So you got access issues that you want to always consider before you even move forward with any type of application. What would be able to actually be a habitable attic? Next is the size of the space and unit itself. So after I got up into the attic, I was able to get up into that space, no issues. I'm perfectly fine. Now, is the attic actually even large enough to be another bedroom? That is something that you need to look into as well before you even consider making an application. Is the actual space. Like I said, you need at least 7 foot in width. So you need to at least be 7 foot wide and at least 10 foot deep to be able to consider at least one bedroom. So you have 70 square feet. Again, we went over it before in the overcrowding webinar that we covered, that you need at least 70 square feet for one person and 100 square feet for 2 people and 150 for 3 people and so on. So you need to at least make sure you have 70 square feet for it to be a one person occupiable bedroom. So you need to see the overall size of the space. Next to consider is if I'm adding in a bedroom, now I just added in that bedroom, I added another person or 2 people potentially into this unit. Do I have enough living and dining space now to actually occupy that bedroom with the number of people I'm hoping to get in there? So that's something you really have to consider as well, because if you had just enough square footage, and we cover this in the overcrowding section, but if you had the 120 square feet for living and had the 80 square feet for dining, so you had 200 square feet total for up to 5 people, and I have my 3 bedrooms and I could safely occupy 5 people in those 3 bedrooms, I just added another bedroom up on the attic space, and now I have another 6 or 7 people. Well, now that living and dining space requirement changes because it goes from 3 to 5 for one requirement, 6 to 8 for another, and then 9 or more for another. So now if I was at the max for 5 right now, and I went to add another bedroom, I need to make sure that I am adding or have enough living and dining space for the additional people I would be adding into that room. So for the example of 5 I gave you, if I went up to the threshold of 6 or 7, then that would mean I would need an additional 30 square feet of living and an additional 20 square feet of dining. So an additional 50 square feet total to accommodate that additional bedroom. And you might be thinking, well, I'll just say that I'm only going to rent it to one person. We don't go on how many that you're renting it to. It's the size of the space. The size of the space determines the occupant load for the structure, not the number of people listed on a lease. So that's one thing that you need to consider, is that if I add another bedroom, do I have enough living and dining space for it to be another bedroom for everyone that safely occupy the building? Also, ceiling height, and I actually have another slide to kind of cover that. I just moved the image smaller up in the corner there, but a bit a larger image for this. Now, Sean, he went over this just last week actually for ceiling height requirements with slope ceilings. And he had mentioned I was going to cover this a little bit more. That is an exemption in the ceiling height section of our codes with sloped ceilings. That typically in most of these attic spaces, you're going to have a sloped ceiling. Sometimes you have them where they're just one slope, and then typically we have them where it's a peak situation. What you need to do is that at least at least for 33% minimum of the floor area needs to be at least 7 feet in height, meaning that I need at least 7 feet for a third of the floor area. Now we stopped measuring floor area at 5 feet. So the graphic here shows 5 feet where I'm stopping for floor area, but as in the picture above, you can see that the slope may goes all the way out to the floor. That's not uncommon. It's just that we stop at 5 feet to get the floor area, which would actually be a benefit if you're looking to convert this, because that means we're reducing the size of the room for the calculation to determine what needs to be 7 foot. Basic rule of thumb is that if you had a 12-foot wide room, that you need at least a third of it, or at least 4 feet of that 12 feet to have 7 feet in ceiling height. I hope that kind of makes sense. Sean went over it more in detail last week, but basically that's the synopsis of it, is that you need at least 1/3 of the floor being 7 foot in height. Now, we've figured out that the space is potentially big enough for us to have it and I can access it. What do I need to look at now for me to be able to move forward with an actual permit application? Well, one of the things that you're going to want to consider before you even make that application is the firewall between dwellings. If you're a single family home, this is not an issue for you. But if you were a duplex and you had a unit on the other side, whether or not under your control or not, you need to have a firewall separating that space. You might be thinking, well, that firewall already exists. I don't need to worry about it. Well, sometimes that's not the case. I think we've all been in attics where you go up into that attic space and you can look across and see the other space on the other side, either through the slats that were just there, or that there were holes, or whatever the scenario may be, that it wasn't actually a firewall ever done. You might be thinking, why was it ever built like that? Well, sometimes when these duplexes were built, the owners owned both sides, but as time went along, they got either subdivided off years ago, or even before subdivisions existed, sides were sold individually and they've just been that way for years. That firewall doesn't exist there. So typically it exists in the basement and the first floor and the second floor, but a lot of times the attic's been forgotten about. So a firewall needs to exist, and it needs to be at least an hour firewall at that location to separate those two units. The other item to consider is, can my floors actually support these imposed loads? The one thing you might not know is, at least in new construction, and most likely in existing as well, attics are intended for storage. That was the main purpose of an attic, was to store stuff, because we all have stuff to store, right? But that is designed at 20 pounds per square foot, basically meaning you're just storing stuff there. No one's walking around that space. But if you were going to convert an attic into habitable space, you need to have the floors be able to support 40 pounds per square foot, because that is not only for storing of items, but it's also for people living there. Attics weren't designed for those types of things, so you need to consider that. A lot of times that gets into your floor joist size and the spacing of your floor joist. That's where a contractor and a licensed professional can help you with those types of things to make sure your floor can support someone living in that attic space. I might be thinking, hey, Paul, well, I've had people that just store just a ton of stuff in the attic, and it was perfectly fine, and now I'm just going to have someone put a bed and a dresser up there. How is that not going to be sufficient? I understand people potentially store a lot of items in those areas. That is a storage space, and that's what it's designed for. When you have people walking across floors and people visiting those areas and things of that nature, additional floor loads are imposed. There's a lot of studies out there on that. So that's why you need to make sure that the floor can support the space for living. So you have that consideration. Also, I need to insulate this space. This is an energy code types of stuff. I'm making habitable space now. So now I'm dealing with the whole, like, you have your shell of your building, the envelope of the building, what's on the exterior wall sides of everything. So now my roof has now become a exterior wall or ceiling to the environment. I need to make sure this is insulated because this is habitable space right below it. So now we need to take those into consideration, and it would be a requirement. This is an energy code thing. This isn't something the city of Hagerstown has. We're required to adopt it by the state of Maryland, and people have to follow it. So when you're doing this type of renovation, an insulation would be required for the space. So I want to make sure I get it correct on here. So that in the ceiling, because now we're saying that you don't have an attic space. It's kind of different in the energy code where you say if you have an attic space, you're thinking, well, this is an attic. Right now we're talking about it as an attic, but if you're making it habitable, there's no attic above it now. So there's no buffer zone in between the elements. You're right up against the elements now. So you need to have an R30 value in that ceiling cavity space. So R30 is a lot more than that R13 that you can buy that's thinner. An R30 is a lot thicker, and that would require at least a 2x8 type of joist or roof rafter for being able to put that type of insulation in that space. Now, the option is always to do the blown type insulation that might be able to work with smaller roof rafters. Again, you would have to work with a licensed professional on that one to get what the requirement would be, but you need to know that insulation would be required in that attic space area in the ceiling between the roof and the ceiling so that you have the proper insulation. All right, so another thing that'll have to be considered is the window size and emergency escape. So as far as does the existing window meet the ventilation code and the emergency escape code? The ventilation code, which Sean actually went over, this was early on when we did our first webinar series that was on living and dining space areas, and he gave a baseline on that one. So if you're looking for ventilation, that at least 4% of the floor area needs to be openable to the outside. So if you have a 100 square foot room, at least 4 square feet needs to open to the exterior for it to meet ventilation purposes. Now, that's great, and sometimes these attic windows might get you there. I've been to some that do and some that do not. So it's really kind of hard to say, well, 100% sure your attic window will meet that 4% rule. But the challenge being is the emergency escape. You're going to have to meet that part of the code. Now, although the ventilation for the example I gave might only be 4 square feet, the emergency escape code is 5.7 square feet that's openable. So that means that usually it's a full case window. Like you see a double hung here in the example for the hand-drawn one, but the full casement is in the photo that is given to you. So you may have to, or you will be required to put in a emergency escape window. You may have to create a larger opening for the window to be in there to meet the emergency escape code requirements. Donnie went through that earlier in this fall series for emergency escape or means of egress, what's needed. So he goes into great details about that. I highly recommend watching that one as well so that you can get a better understanding of an emergency escape window and what the requirements are for them. The one thing that you'll need to consider if converting this space, not only do I need an emergency escape window, because that would be required, and then any enlargement that you may have to do with that window to fit that larger window in that space, because typically the attic windows are smaller, is the window sill height of that window in that attic. Because if you are at least 18 inches above the floor, so I have 18 or more inches to the windowsill or glazed area of the window, then you're perfectly fine. You don't have any issues. But if your windowsill height to that glazing is less than 18 inches, then now it's going to have to be tempered glass. That is Maryland safety glass law in our state. So that isn't something that the city of Hagerstown created. That is a statewide code that we're required to enforce. So that if you are less than 18 inches from that window to the floor, from the windowsill to the floor, then you're going to have to make that tempered glass. that is going to be a much larger expense of trying to put in a tempered glass window. Sometimes that can double or triple that cost of that emergency escape window. So something to consider. If you're thinking, I'm going to use the existing opening, but I got to make it a little bit bigger, you might want to look at making that windowsill height a little bit higher if you were too low on your windowsill height. Now, granted, you can be more than 44 inches, but I've never been in an attic where the windowsill height's 44 inches high off the floor and then I have an emergency escape window. I've never seen it. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I just haven't seen it in my time here with the city. But so you might want to consider if I'm already at 15 inches from the windowsill to the floor, you might want to go ahead and consider being like, all right, let's just put an extra 5-6 inches on top of this windowsill height and just go up a little bit more and to make this window to work in there for emergency escape purposes. It's going to be something that you're going to have to do to meet code. It might not be something that you're considering when you're looking at the space. All right, so I kind of have an unfinished one here. I only got so many pictures for attic spaces, but the one thing you have to consider is electric and heating the space. So I was able to make a room up in this area, but now I got to have the proper amount of electric outlets or receptacles for this space. And it's not going to be the property maintenance code requirement. This is new space. This is new habitable space. You're going to have to meet the currently adopted electrical code. So you're going to have more outlets that you need to put in the bedroom that you're creating in that space. So something just to consider. That's an additional cost that you would have. Also, you're going to need a wall controlled, switch or a wall switch controlling the light and or outlet for that space that you would need. So again, you would have a light in that space. And then also the stairs are going to have to be illuminated. Now, sometimes, we have these pull string lights that might just be at the bottom of the stairs that you can traverse for uninhabitable attics. That's perfectly fine for uninhabitable attics. To make it habitable, you need a 3-way switch to be able to turn the light off at the bottom and the top of the stairs. Because if you have someone going upstairs to the bedroom, it's not a coordinated effort with a person that occupies in the building to yell down the steps to them and say, hey, turn off the light because I'm upstairs now. It's got to be able so the person that goes up and down the steps can turn the light on and off as they desire. So that is a requirement by code as well. So you're going to need a 3-way switch to control that. Switches at the bottom of the stairs and at the top of the stairs. The one thing when you're making it habitable is that you need to heat the space. So the space is going to need to be heated. It's got to maintain a temperature of 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, how can you achieve that? The choice is kind of yours on that. Electric baseboard heat could certainly be used. That is something that a lot of people use. It's more convenient and it's an easier way to get heat into a space. Or you may have an existing HVAC system that you can modify the duct and actually put a vent into the room to actually provide the heat there as well. So the choice is kind of up to you as the homeowner to decide on what you would want to do to heat the space, but the space must be heated. Again, it's something that has to be identified. Now, I mentioned cooling of the space. Now, cooling of the space, that is not required by code whatsoever. We don't require air conditioning in Hagerstown for you to have habitable space. But it's going to be something that you want to consider. Cooling the space, attics are going to get hot during the summer. And so you want to make parameters available for people to cool that space. Now, you might be thinking, hey, they can get a window unit. They could just go ahead and put a window unit in and cool that space. That's perfectly fine. They most certainly could put in a window unit. The thing is, though, is that they cannot utilize that emergency escape window as the space for their window unit. So you're going to need a second window for that space. Sometimes the spaces already have it where you have 2 windows in there, kind of like in the example or the picture that's shown to you. You have 2 windows in that space, in that attic. One window can most certainly be the one for the air conditioning unit, and the other window could be your emergency escape window. that could be an option. You might want to consider putting in a mini split system then that not only would do the heating and cooling of the space, but it's something that you could do as well for some consideration. Like I said, cooling is not required of the space, but it's something that you want to factor in of how will the tenant do it, because it's going to get hot in that attic, and you want to make it so that you have tenants that stay with you a long time, or if you're living in the space, it's some space that you enjoy. So you want to make sure that you're creating an environment and a condition that would be the best for everyone in the future, not just for a wintertime purpose. All right, another thing that you're going to have to consider as well is the smoke and CO alarms. That they are going to be additional added in that space. So what type of detector? Battery or electric? You're thinking, well, Paul, it's 1 and 2 family, it's battery, it's allowed. Well, this is a new space that's being put in. You're going to need to put an electric in this new space. It will not be battery. It will be electric alarms will be required in the new bedroom that you're creating in this attic space. So battery will not be allowed. So you'll have that additional expense as well of an electrician and the electrical or the hardwired outlets, or I'm sorry, hardwired smoke alarms in that space. I gave you the mounting requirements here, but that's just in the diagram itself. It's just where they need to be located at. Now, when you're adding in this type of space here, the requirement, you may be required to upgrade your smoke alarms in other spaces in the existing dwelling that's on the second or first floor or in the basement. It all depends on the situation, and that at times when people have done these types of renovations, they are required. Again, it's a case-by-case situation, but just be aware that smoke alarms to be hardwired may be required in other parts of the structure rather than just in that one bedroom. It may be required on all floors or in all bedrooms as well. Again, it's a case-by-case situation, but it's an additional cost that you may have to consider. Now, with carbon monoxide alarms, you want to make sure that if you have a fossil fuel burning equipment in uninhabitable attics, these CO alarms are not required in uninhabitable attics. But as soon as you make habitable space on another floor, you're going to need the CO alarm on that other level. So you will have that additional expense. Now, you can always get combination alarms, smoke and CO, they do both, that are sometimes a little bit cheaper, but you will need to have a smoke and CO alarm on that other level. And again, they may be required on the other levels inside the home as well, that when you're doing those renovations. So again, it's additional costs that you may have to be aware of that might be an unknown to you. Now, I keep on mentioning cost, right? And we all know it's going to cost money to make this other bedroom. Well, there are actual opportunities here in Hagerstown through Invest Hagerstown. You could actually potentially get a grant. We have a program that is the Rental Property Rehabilitation Grant Program that you could apply for. The grant, they can go up to $7,500, and basically it requires a 2-to-1 match, meaning that if the city is put in at $7,500, our max, that we're going to be looking for a match of $15,000 from the property owner to go into it. So we're looking for $22,000, $500 investment into the structure to make any types of renovations and upgrades to the home. So that certainly is an opportunity that you could go for. You might be thinking, oh, I'm doing the numbers inside my head. I'm nowhere near the $22,500 for my overall project. Well, to maximize your grant, think about upgrading other things too. Upgrading a bathroom on the second floor, doing an upgrade to the HVAC system that you might only have heat in the building. Maybe you consider adding air conditioning as well, or an upgrade to the kitchen. So there's opportunities for you to be able to get grant money to do this type of work, and I would highly recommend pursuing it and looking into that program. I have a contact for the Department of Community and Economic Development. You can call that number that's on the screen, and you can always ask for Caitlin Bell. She generally takes those applications, and she would work with you to complete an application and get it submitted to a review committee that will review the application, and we'll see if we have appropriate use of the funds to do these types of renovations here. I highly, highly recommend pursuing that whenever you're looking at doing any type of work. And this is solely for rental properties. This is not for owner-occupied properties. There's other opportunities for that. This is solely for rental properties. That's through our Invest Hagerstown program. And it doesn't have to be just for that attic renovation that I'm talking about. You're thinking about, Paul, that attic stuff, I heard everything you had to say. That is too much for me to take on. But you're thinking, I've always wanted to upgrade my kitchen or bathroom. Take advantage of this grant. Look into it. We would love to see applications coming in through this program to be able to enhance some of our rental properties in our community and make a better living environment for our residents. So now I'll go through some questions. Now, I know I covered a lot of questions that you all may have while we were going through this and thinking like, oh, what about this? What about that type of stuff? So certainly if you have any, please, submit any questions to me. I have to get my notes here to see where I'm at. But and I want to, as always, like I do, I like to thank everyone for participating in this webinar. I really do appreciate everyone's time as you sit in to listen to us go through some different requirements. And, we kind of know that I didn't cover every aspect of things. And I try to keep on saying that throughout the whole entire series that, we're not covering every aspect. We're just giving you the generalities of things, just the typical situations we come across. Hagerstown's very unique, which we all like about Hagerstown. So each structure is different. So just take that in consideration when you're looking at doing these types of things. Our goal was always to give you just a general overview of this particular section as it relates to the topic here of making attics habitable. If you have any specific questions, you can always, relate it to your property. You can always email us at codecompliance@hagerstownmd.org, where we'll be able to answer those questions for you. And, what we're going to do is we're going to open things up to general questions right now. And if you have any, you can just tap or click on that Q&A button and submit your questions. If you happen to be viewing this at any time later, you can certainly email us the questions at that address that's on the screen. First I'm going to go over a couple questions that we kind of get. I know I kind of covered a lot of things. You're thinking, what questions could he possibly have when he did a lot of Q&A type things along the way? Well, the one thing is, what type of permits am I going to need to make these type of changes? And let me stop my share here so that I can actually see any questions that come in. All right, so, you might be thinking, what permits do I need? What do I need to do this work? Well, a building permit will be required to convert an attic into habitable space. So that is something that you will need to do for any types of things. As converting this space. Building permit will be required. Even you're thinking, it's pretty much storage now. It meets a lot of the things that you're talking about, Paul. Well, you're still going to need the building permit to make something to change the use of a space. An electrical permit may be required as well, most likely will be required, because it's odd that I would see all of the appropriate outlets in the spaces there and electric baseboard heaters. Let's think about it. Do you really heat the uninhabitable attic space? Probably not. So you're going to need electric baseboard heat for that area. You're going to need an electrical permit. You're going to need additional outlets, wall switches, all that type of stuff. You're going to need an electrical permit, and you will need a licensed professional to pull that appropriate permit. And then a mechanical permit may be required as well, depending on what you're doing for heating the space. If you're looking at extending your existing HVAC system, doing what we call a duct modification and adding in a vent off of that space, that will require a mechanical permit to do that type of work, and by a licensed professional as well. If you're looking at the mini split system, same thing for that. A mechanical permit will be required for that. Now you're like, okay, well, Paul, you keep telling me I gotta get licensed contractors. How do I even know who's licensed? I don't know who are licensed in Hagerstown. You can find that actually on our website. What we do is you go to hagerstowncode.org, and on the left-hand side, you'll see licensing. Don't click on it, but if you just hover over it, you'll see a box pop out, and at the bottom of that box will be Hagerstown Licensed Contractors. If you click on that link, that will take you to a page that will have our contractors listed by who are licensed contractors, meaning that can do construction work, who are licensed, city licensed electricians, and who are city licensed plumbers. They're all listed there. Now I mentioned mechanical, which are HVAC, that is state license. So you need to go to the state license stuff to actually figure that out through the Department of Labor to get any answers as far as if a person's licensed that way. But you can get that. As far as licensed contractors, for what we have on that site, that is for 3 or more family homes. Now, granted, they can do 1 and 2 family too, but they need to be MHIC licensed, meaning Maryland Home Improvement Commission license, again, through the Department of Labor. So for mechanical and for building, they need to be state licensed, and for electrical and plumbing, they need to be city licensed. So that kind of gives you just a basic line of what types of permits you would need. So as a homeowner, you can always apply for your own building permit, but for the trade permits, you would need to have a licensed professional apply for those. Now I'll kind of go and look here, see if we have any questions that kind of came in. And, you know, one thing is about like plumbing permits and when is a plumber actually required. Jason went over those earlier in this webinar series of when is a permit required and when it's not. And that's a series that we have that you can most certainly get some answers out of. But, you know, we do exempt certain things for residential properties not requiring a permit. So if you are actually replacing something that is already existing, so you had a sink, a toilet, or a kitchen sink that was there and you wanted to upgrade it and replace what was there, you're not going to modify the drain lines, you're not going to modify the water supply lines, then no permit is required for that work. You can swap those items out. Same with a faucet or something along those lines. Now, if you're looking to rearrange the kitchen or the bathroom, you have to extend any type of lines or move drain lines, extend supply lines, anything along those lines. Yes, a permit is going to be required for that work. Same thing if you have just your overall sanitary sewer lines, if you have your supply lines that are in your basement and you're like, those need replaced, that's going to require a permit too. The only thing that's an exempt is if it's an existing fixture going in the exact same place than the existing fixture was, and it's not modifying any of those supply or drain lines, no permit is required for that. But if you need a permit, a plumber must, a city licensed plumber is the only one that can pull the permit, and he must perform the work. Now, I don't think in maybe attics you're looking to add a bathroom, but people have. And I tell you what, that would have been awesome when I was a kid. If I would have my own floor just basically for my own bedroom and bathroom, that would have been cool. But it looks like I've kind of answered some of the questions that have come in here, and I've taken up a lot of your time, but there was a lot of things that I went over and with this. So I know I took a lot of time today, and I appreciate again everyone being here. So thank you all again for being part of this series. Today is the last one that we have for this fall. We're looking into other ones that we might be able to offer. Please always look out for those invites when we're letting you know what the series will be. Please be sure to follow us on our social media accounts. We have Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you search PCAD Hagerstown, and that's PCAD Hagerstown, you can find us on any of those platforms. You can follow us. You can see what's going on in Hagerstown and kind of get what activities are happening, and also other different code tips and things that you might want to be aware of just to have better knowledge of what's going on in this area. Again, I thank everyone for being a participant of this webinar series. And, you know, we will be sending out any invites for any future ones that we have. These are all being recorded. They will be posted on YouTube as well for you to be able to view later. And there will also be links on our website for you to be able to view them. Again, thank you all for participating in this series.